Hello and welcome, welcome to another issue of Lee shutting down the music. Actually, I know where the music's emanating from. It's from my other screen, which lets me watch all the chat. And all the chat is going to come from the live broadcast chat that is now hosted on Twitch. If you're joining us from Videoland, you won't be able to see it, but everyone else does. It's an opportunity for you to ask me a question that causes me to do something on screen over the next half an hour, as long as it's legal. So, there's a couple of subjects I wanted to cover vaguely. I had a vague idea of what I'd like to talk about, but guess what? I was so engrossed in writing a new shader, a post-process shader, that I completely run up to 3 minutes before the broadcast and I was still hacking away at the shader. So what I thought would be a really good idea is if I give you a glimpse of that work. I think we did this kind of broadcast a couple of weeks ago where you saw half an hour of me coding through the engine and tweaking little things to get something to run. And I was fully confident that I could actually demonstrate the finished post-process shader effect at the beginning of this Twitch session to show, this is where you can get in version 1.131. But like a good little Samaritan that I am, I went ahead and finished it off, added a few more bits, and in doing so, messed it up. And the big thing I think that messed it up is, well, I'll go into that a little bit later. But I just wanted to say hello, this is Game Guru, my name is Lee Bamber. I am going to talk about the insides of Game Guru this week. If you want to look at more general videos on how to make a game and other aspects of Game Guru, there are now over 40 plus videos that have been recorded through Twitch. Broadcasting is available just by scrolling to tutorials on the main Game Guru website and then going into the banner at the top, which you can find Game Guru development broadcasts, and you'll find them all here. Newest to oldest, and some are difficult, some are easy to follow, some are really advanced. Consider this broadcast a really advanced one, so I hope you enjoy it. I'm not going to, because I'm going to be ripping my hair out trying to figure out what the bug is. So what is it I'm coding? Well, let me just go to my screen. You can see here that I've got obviously the changelog, but also look what I've got open. I've got the post-bloom effects, which is the HLSL shader. I've also got the terrain shader, the entity shader, the character shader, the vegetation shader, the static shader for light mapping, the two weapon shaders, a static character shader for characters in the distance, and a sky shader. Just a small number of shaders out of all the shaders that Game Guru uses by default. Were you to write your own game engine from scratch, you'd have to write many more than these shaders. These are just the sort of the high-level shaders that most people may be familiar with. So what is it that I am trying to do today? Well, it's very interesting. What I want to do is create something called sampled ambient obscurance. It's not sampled, scaling ambient occlusion. SAO. It used to be called screen space ambient occlusion, but there's faster ways to do that now. And the good news is I actually made a start on, and actually got some good results. If I drag these into my hot package, I'm trying to give you the end result before I take you right back to the horrid code, because I broke it. Look at these two screenies. Right, can you see the difference between this one, which is the before, and this one, which is the after one? In the before one on the left hand side, you can see that where the fence hits the floor, it's basically just a clean cut line, and it's not indicative of what you would see in nature. In nature, light wouldn't be able to get to the very crease, the edge between the vertical and the horizontal, whereas in real life you get something called ambient obscurance, where the light can't really get that deep. You know, it doesn't have light from all directions, it only has light from just a few scattered rays, which is on the right. You can see this obscurance taking effect. You see the light can't get into that very crease, and so we shade it based on the amount of obscurance that's going on, and that then applies, you know, across the board. So it's not just the crease there, it's also the gap in between those two concrete slabs. It's the 3D definition of that girder. It's even the plants. You'll notice there's extra shadowing going on inside the plants, especially near the floor. And in a later version that I did, there's a little bit of SAO going on the gun and the hand. So you can see it looks really good in a screenshot, looks even better when you're playing it in real time. And I would hope that in the next 20 minutes I can fix it and show you it working. But that's highly improbable. Debugging stuff takes hours and days. So as you can see, this is another shot that I made. I was hiding on top of a mountain looking down on this guy. You see the guy on the left, he's got no shadow under his knee and his foot. But on the right hand side there's a shadow under the knee and the foot. Again, you've got some nice shadowing going on underneath that crate and around the boxes. Definition around those concrete columns. And basically, rather than having to sit through huge amounts of light mapping, this is a real-time process. Obviously you're going to need a decent card with a decent amount of video memory to be able to handle the now much larger depth buffer that's required for this effect. But you can see the steps we're making in making sure that our visuals progress in line with the features that we add. And the last two I can show you are these. The first ones I created actually. The one on the left, really nice bit of specular going on the brickwork and the windows and then the trees in the distance, all very good and well. But when you look at the right side, I know it's only subtle, but look at the edge, you know, that wall meets that wall and you get this nice ambient obscurant edge. And again here, this thing that thrusts out. And you know, sometimes, especially when there isn't much other lighting going on and the textures are mostly the same colour but they are at 90-degree angles to each other, you get this weird situation which just blends in. And it's fine if that's all you expected, but when you look on the right hand side and you say, yeah, I can definitely see where that wall hits, then you know you've actually got this nice crisp definition. You know where one wall ends and the other wall begins. And even on window frames, look at the darkness around the window frames. At a pixel level, that's using ambient obscurance as well. And those posts that stick out, where you might just thought it was just a pattern in the wall, you can actually see that it's actually a bit that sticks out. So that's SAO, and I'll show you what runs right now. Typically, trying to make it better end up messing up the whole thing. I'm not too phased, but I'm just going to show you a few little experiments that I've got in the back of my mind, which I think might solve the problem. So I'm going to use my house model, which is something that allows me to load in a level very quickly and then press test game, run through all these because there's not many assets to have to load, and then we get to see, boom, currently a nice black screen, useless, completely useless. So what I usually do to debug shaders, I know these days we've got shader debugging tools and all the rest of it, but there's not that much available for DX9, and certainly not debugging tools that run DX9 that actually work. I mean, most of them crash because this is consuming quite a lot of resources, both system and video memory. So the black screen is actually a result of me doing some debugging higher up here. So I just wanted to go into this get offset position to make sure that I was taking the world transform, converting it into camera space. So if we come out of there, we don't want sample, we want to come out of there because I think my last debug, yes, was here. Essentially, sum is how much darkening that we want to apply to each pixel on the scene. And you can see it's not 0 to 1, it's not 0 to 100, it's not 0 to 1000. It's always black, which means all of them are 0. So I think sum is 0. So the problem is somewhere this far and further up. So it's not this far down. Once we get to this point, I think we'll be fine. So the last place I checked that kind of worked fine was this. And what this will allow us to do is to check the normals of our scene. So if I save that post-process, it's always important that if you had a successful load of a post-process, you'd have to come out the software, go back in. If you change a shader and you loaded that shader successfully and then you change the shader will still stay in memory. It absolutely stays in memory. So if you are changing and tweaking shaders and having fun, you will need to come out the software, go back in and then reload your scene. I often wonder how many times I've done this, and had I took all that amount of testing time and then added it to a piece of code which would dynamically update the shader in real time, who knows, maybe I would have saved time rather than spent needless time. So anyone familiar with normal maps can kind of see what this actually is. You've got red on the x-axis, green on the y, and then z on the blue. So obviously this is an x because it's red, so that's x going in that positive direction there. Well, yeah, x positive. Black, because it'd be a negative number, it's negative on the red, so that's going to be x minus. And just like we see, green is basically y down, and blue is yz. Is z plus. So if you understand normal maps, this is basically reversed. You can see the whole normal map angles is reversed because y up, which is y positive, should be green positive, but it's actually the other way around. Green is down, so you can see they've all been reversed. But what it does tell us is I've managed to get these normals, but where did I get them from? Well, there's a really clever technique you can do in a post-process shader, which is the crux of why I've been spending a long time on the post-process shader. We used to be able to pass in a depth, but I was passing it through an 8-bit float, which was ridiculous. You'd only have 256 different variations of a depth. It produced pretty horrible depth values, actually. So I've replaced that with an RGB 32F render target, which allows me 32 bits of resolution on all of them. And whilst I had this huge amount of render target to render to, I actually rendered all the camera space, the vertices, to that instead. So now we've actually got that transformation going on further up in the pipeline, which is great. But when I went to the motion blur, the view space coordinates wasn't much use. It really needed world space coordinates. So I changed all the shaders so they output world space coordinates. So you can see the original, it was doing all sorts of crazy things with view projection. But what I've changed it to is here. So you're just outputting it as world, and the one before that was world view, which would output view space, camera space stuff, which worked fine. So what I'm going to do, just for fun, is we want to know that it works with the old way, right? And which is what we're going to do now. We're going to comment out that, comment in back, instead of the world, it's going to be world view. So it's going to break the depth stuff I've just implemented and the motion blur. But it is going to get this working in because I think this is what you're actually interested in. So we're going to go back to world view and we're just going to do the terrain and the entities to begin with. So again, we comment out that what I thought would work but isn't. And then put back in world view. So now world view is both coming in on entity and terrain. And because of that now we don't need to multiply the world space with the view matrix in order to create a camera space orientation for our vector. And then that should carry on as before. We don't need to do a debug on the normal anymore because I rather suspect all this would work. Hehe, said that before. So we comment out my debug line. We're going to let it run straight through to here. And you'll find that later on I'm going to just render the occlusion on its own. I'm not going to combine it with the rest of the scene. So commented that out. And also there's another place, because that's just the single reading in for a possible early out that I'm going to re-implement a little bit later. The real magic happens inside here, because this goes through like a loop of 8 iterations, checking all the points around the pixel of interest just to see whether there's any obscurance going on. But in order to figure it out, you've also got to figure out the actual, 3D coordinate of that obscurance point around the hemisphere that you're checking. And I'm multiplying it by the view matrix because I'm bringing it in as world, but we're not anymore. We're bringing it in as view, which kind of worked before. So hopefully those changes should result in a slight improvement on what we had before. You notice I put the Game Guru on a hot link on the taskbar. It means I can actually run it instantly over and over and over again. I don't have to keep finding it in a file somewhere. Get our host back. Bam, 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 bam. Now, it should be a big white screen and hopefully some stuff on the screen. Well, we've got some stuff. It's probably what I wanted. But it's a perfect opportunity to show you this. See it? Can you see it? Do you know what it is yet? Yes, that is the unfiltered, unblurred obscurance data. So obviously using some random pattern in order to give you that sort of that fuzzy natural feel to it. But now you get the idea of what it's made up of. Essentially, every single pixel in the post-process shader calculates its real sort of 3D pixel position. Then it sends out this bubble, this half bubble, this hemisphere, and then it checks lots of other coordinates based on its you know, its central sort of center of the sphere position, and if that is confirmed to be obscured based on, you know, what we can see, so it's this line that shoots off from that center point, it's going to hit something else, which we can find out from the depth data, or no, from the view data, which you can see, then it all works really well. And if you're actually in the middle of the wall though, and you're sending out this ray on this hemisphere, you're not going to hit anything, you see, because you're going to hit outwards. Now there's a couple of little things like, but I'll show that later, where the terrain has a little bit of occlusion going on, which didn't need it, so I might have some way to switch this off. In fact, I will. And I thought by 4 PM I would be able to give you a demonstration of this. I'm going to move the camera settings out of the way. I'm going to move post effects to the top and increase this to include SAO sliders, so you can change the radius, the randomness, the size, the density, all that kind of cool stuff. But it looks like by going back to view space, I've solved it. So now I need to figure out, why couldn't I take world space coordinates, multiply it by a view matrix, and get exactly the same coordinates? That's going to be the big question. And once I solve that, I'll have solved everything, and I can bring back all the features of the post-process shader. But whilst we're here, I think I have the opportunity to remove some more of that debug stuff, and you can see what it would look like. So let's jump back to this, where it calls it. There's no debug stuff at the end of there. This is the bit that blurs it. We want that. This is the bit that, here we go. You see how we're showing the AO here at the end, and that's what you get to see. But why is it not blurring? This is the question. So if we look at our techniques, which are further down, yeah, basically what you're looking at here is every shader has a number of techniques, and within each technique there's a number of passes, and within each pass there's a vertex shader and a pixel shader. Won't bore you too much with that. I'm sure you'll find it yourself if you want to get indulgent. But what I did, I commented out I only commented out all the passes except the first one. So I only wanted to see the raw obscurance data coming out, but now I want to blur it on its horizontal, I want to blur it on its vertical, and then once I've blurred it twice, I'm going to combine it with the frame, which is, the frame buffer is the original game that you see before you start doing all these post-process effects. I want to get to the pixel shader for it. Here it is, and there's no debug data yeah, there is, so I'm going to get rid of that. In fact, no, let's not get rid of that. I'm going to show you what it looks like, just the obscurance data. Again, going to come out, go back in, and now what you should see is completely white screen, and then the obscurance data, but it's been blurred. And there may also be a value. In fact, I will put a value in, a slider value, for the amount of blurring you want, the degree of blurring, how much blurring, also how many passes you want to do of the geometry. This is just 9 samples. It just sends out 9 rays from each pixel. If it hits something, it's going to get darker. If it hits nothing, it will stay white. That's just 9 rays. It's not a great representation, and the ray is not very long. It only goes out a short way and then it stops of its own accord. Great ambient occlusion or ambient obscurance will send out a huge ray and send hundreds of them out per pixel. But now we get into the realms of raycasting and not into the realms of real-time game simulations. So now we should have a white screen, yes, with it all blurred. And it looks a little bit better now. It doesn't look dots. Now it's all nice. Looks blurry, doesn't it? But that's because we've blurred it. And you might think, well, my game's going to start looking blurry. Amazingly not. Amazingly, when we do the next step, which is to combine it with the real, I'll show you what the real one looks like. If we switch off any sort of bloom, it switched to another shader called post none. instead of post bloom. And post none is just the regular scene with no. I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, it controls brightness, but it doesn't do any of these extra effects like motion blur, depth of field, vignette, things like that, light rays. But if you switch that on, we're now going to my super combined post process. Now, don't worry that. Why are you adding this seriously slow effect? I don't want it. Don't worry. You'll be able to switch it on and off. You won't lose any performance in the next build. Just that people who have nicer cards can now switch this on, or even if you don't have, if you have like a mid-range card, you still switch it on and just have a play with it, see if it kind of works for your situation. And just like we've got with these, there may be another setting for highest or extreme or something, or I might confine it to here. You know, keep it away from terrains, entities, grass, things like that. But now you want to see it combined. I know you do. So now we're going to come out again, comment out these two lines. Now you can see there's a define. I can actually do the same thing but set this define up there, but I was down here. I didn't want to go back up and go back down again. Luminance consideration is it's really about the difference between colours on a monitor and colours original colours as they originated out of RGB, and then what actually happens to a monitor and how you should alter it. But I've kept that switched off as well, so it does not change the AO for luminance at all. And this is the magic number. Basically it takes the old frame, which is the original game buffer going in, it multiplies it with the AO, so if you multiply any colour with white, it stays that colour. If you multiply a colour with anything less than white, it darkens that colour, proportional to the gradient. So we're multiplying it by either white or whatever darkening the ambient obscurance has introduced. So now we've saved that, we can run it again. And in theory we will now see lovely colour, but now with shadow. Or rather ambient occlusion, ambient obscurance. I think the terms are interchangeable, actually. Just glancing over to the questions, because I do like to answer them on the fly rather than have a big lot of questions at the end. Will the shader shadow rectify the roof shadow? Some have been on about having to have roofs thick for the shadows to be right. You know what? I am actually tempted to go back to the shadowy stuff and solve that. I mean, I'll show you the issue, because I kind of walked right up close to it and it's like, oh, that's not a really good shadow when you actually put your nose right to it. And so I do want to solve that. I'd like to solve it for this update, yes. But don't hold I'm not holding my breath on it, because this is what I wanted to do, because this is the one that's really transformative. So if I show you this, and you might think, well, I don't notice any difference. Well, you will notice if I switch it off. That's what you had before. Now don't worry about the screen going slightly pale. That's just because I've commented out all the, you know, bloom, motion blur, depth of field, screen, brightness, contrast, all those clever gubbins have all been commented out. The only thing you look at now is the raw back buffer from the game coming in and then SAO applied to it, which is why it's sort of slightly foggy. But once figured out why turning world into camera space using a view matrix doesn't work, once I figured that out, then it will all be coming back online, it'll all be part of the final update. So I'll go without, so you can see the a special look around the window frames and the door, and then afterwards you've now got the shadow. I mean, if you look at this window here, the first story window on our right, I'll just bounce backwards and forwards. That's with SAO, without SAO, with SAO, without SAO. In isolation, fine, but what I'm going to show you now, I mean, I wish I could actually get rid of that paliness, but the best way to show it is to load in Big Escape. I was really excited to actually add SAO and just keep working on one model and then surprise myself when I ran, you know, the whole thing. Now this won't work perfect because I only changed the terrain on the entity. I would also need to change things like the grass, the shadow. I mean, why not? Okay, let's do that then. Let's give you the best possible tour. Shaders, entity, character. Imagine all I'd have to do is comment that out, put that one in, vegetation, comment that one in, take that one out, static, which is for light maps, but there is none in the escape. Comment this one in. This is weapons, because we'll need weapons. Some of the weapons may be bone animations, so we'll bring that one in. Ignore static, sky, leave that as is, save it all. Now run, and I'm going to launch the big escape. What you should see is characters having it, really small objects when they drop the weapon. Now there's ambient obscurance underneath the weapon. It just adds that extra level of polish. So let's see what it looks like. Fingers crossed. Just moving on. What GG version will this work? It'll be version 1.131, and it's coming out very, very soon. I'm just doing testing and all the stuff I've changed so far, but I got a couple of negative reviews on Steam, pretty much pointing to the fact that Game Guru looks 15 years old. Now, in order to absolutely assure everyone it is not 15 years old, by adding scalable ambient obscurance, which is a relatively recent technique, I cannot be accused because that technique didn't exist 15 years ago, so there. And whilst I'm at it, I will continue to add visual features as we move along. So this is going to be in the very, very next update that you'll get on Steam. And I'll be looking to add more visuals, bits and pieces as we move along. The spinning that you saw at the start, that was actually a little technique which allows the video buffer to cache all the textures you're going to have at the start of the game, so there's no stutter when you first start. The thing is, that happens when the screen is dark, and then it spins and then it fades in. The reason you saw it is that I've replaced the post-process, removed that screen darkening effect, that's why you got to see it. Will we now be able to use AO maps? You can actually use AO maps right now. There's an _O that you can apply to your shaders, your entities, and it will actually use that in an occlusion map. So you can actually pre-light map your entities and then drop them in. That already exists. Or you can bake it into diffuse texture, you can do that too. This is different. This is real-time ambient obscurance. This will actually work no matter what you throw at it. You don't do any preparation, you just throw it in and it will just start having ambient occlusion at you. So I've got our bloom on. The reason you have to switch that on, if you've got motion blur off and depth of field off, the engine knows it doesn't need the depth data, so it just skips rendering that. But of course it doesn't know about SAO yet, so I have to fool it by giving it do a little bit of motion blur intensity, although you'd never see it. So it's a little bit washed out, so I apologise for that. But what you'll see almost immediately is, say, well, I'll just bounce between the two so you can see for yourself. So, like I said, forget about the paling out, that's just something I'm going to sort. But you'll actually notice, especially say on the floor, where once it was just, if I can pick a good bit, like, looks like, oh, I'll tell you what we'll do, we'll knock these shaders up to top. I don't think our grass is actually doing our ambient. No, it isn't. It is not. So, bloom. Yeah, so you can see this sort of where the floor meets the concrete and the concrete meets the floor. You get a little bit darker because of obscurance.
Hey buddy, you ready to blow this joint?
In there.
I can't help you with those guards, but if you can get to the extraction point, I'll pick you up from there.
Yeah, it does. You can see the
terminal number of bad guys.
Yeah, grass hasn't got it. So I'm going to go back to that shader and then give it a good kick. But you can see underneath the character now there's a little bit of shadow. Yeah. And the gun, even the gun has a little bit of shadow before I collect it. See? And if I show you him with and without, you know, it's just, I mean, look, in between his legs there, how it's dark, and then if I switch it off, you don't get that. So this isn't sort of extra normal maps or stuff like that. This is actually, this is a real-time ambient obscurance shader. Yeah, okay, that's over there. But you know, I want to show you the grass. The grass looks really good when you have this ambient obscurance going on. Let's go back to the shader. Don't even know where I put my shaders. Vegetables. Okay, what have we got? Ah, we got two. We got high and low, haven't we? So that's now doing world view. So that's going to send out world view. Gee, good. This one's just sending out world still, so we'll set that up to world view. That's correct now. And that's sending out that, which that shouldn't matter because it's not using the W vector. So we save. Remember, we've got to relaunch. Another question popped in. Synchromass says it looks much better. Thanks very much. VIG asked in which DirectX version. Same. DirectX 9.0C. It's the same DirectX engine. I have not replaced the engine overnight. That would have been a bit of a trick. But what you'll find is that most, if not all, of the techniques that I was going to implement with the DX11 engine, which would have taken months and months of a rewrite, we can introduce say 90% of those features in this one, and we can drip feed it into the engine as the opportunity arises, I should say. I wouldn't want to kind of go off for 2 months and add every single visual treat you ever wanted. That's not going to be fair for people who don't want any visual improvements. You know, they don't want the engine to be any slower. They want it as fast as possible with great AI and gameplay. You know, that's what they want. So, let's put everything up to high again. Do we get it? No, I'm not seeing it. So that means we probably need a little bit more finicking. But you'll see it eventually. In fact, I think in the screenshot, not that one. I think it was it this one? Yeah, I can actually demonstrate it. The way it was last night about 5 AM. If I go and zoom in just to the right of this crate, and zoom into the right of this crate. This is the grass as you see it now. It's on highest level. But look at this grass here. Notice the little darkened shadow just underneath and the obscurance inside the individual leaves. And as the leaves go back in front of each other, the ones at the behind are getting a little bit more obscured, so they get less light. So then there's a light play on that. And because they animate, that obscurance moves. It's real time. Every single pixel will respect the obscurant factors around it. So you know this lovely, almost better 3D looking. And if you look at that, you wouldn't say that grass was particularly 3D. It just you think it's probably grass. But this, you know where it is in space. You know where it is because of the shadow. It gives you a sense of this third dimension. So I'm a little bit miffed that I couldn't change the world normal verts, which means it's going to pull it from this animation because it's going to move it a little bit. It's going to give it the world view, which takes that and it sends it down, and then it sends it via those same vectors out to the depth map. So why would it not? Okay, I don't really want to dwell on it. I'm sure I will solve it in the next hour or so. Will this cost frame rates? Well, let's find out, shall we? This is a pretty decent scene. We'll all agree.
You ready to blow this joint?
I'm ready to blow this joint.
I can't help you with those guards, but if you can get to the extraction point, I'll pick you up from there.
Me versus an undetermined number of bad guys? What could go wrong?
So I'm currently running at 84 frames per second. 83, 84. With just standard, you know, a basic post-process with no fancy effects. If I switch on this huge, you know, doing loads and loads of samples and matrix multipliers for every single pixel times 9, what's that going to do to us? When 86, 84, 82, 83. So I'd say, based on 80 FPS being, you know, a relatively honest value, that there's no real reduction in performance, and this, what I've just activated, is the most intense you could imagine. So don't worry about performance at this level. If I switch everything to lowest, as some people may have lower end graphics cards, we're running at 180 FPS, 176, 180. And then we'll switch it off. 176, 177. So even less, yeah. So no performance increase or decrease whatsoever. It's, I wouldn't say it's free. The post-processor was already doing a lot of depthy stuff, but as I've learned a little bit more about the mathematics of it, I've actually improved some of the shaders, so I don't doing as many calculations with the pixel shader where it hurts the most. That's why I actually did the you know, transporting all the world or view vectors in a G buffer. You know, it's basically a huge buffer where you can actually store big floats, and then move that across and work on them directly is a lot quicker than taking a depth, calculating a world, multiplying it to get a view, and you have to do that for every pixel, and then you have to do it for 9 times that one pixel if you want to sample around it. And we're doing lots of sample arounds, and we're doing things like blurs, and we're doing obscurance detection and stuff like that. So don't be surprised if once we've added this feature, the post-process effect gets faster. That's just the nature of continually looking at shaders before we move on to the next one. So no more questions on the board. So hopefully everyone has kind of figured out what it is that I'm playing around with and why I've actually delayed the version 1.131. I wanted to get it released earlier this week, but I figured it would be really great if, in addition to the improved importer, so you can import more kinds of look at static. Let's switch that motion blur on, haven't we? Yes. I mean, little things like that, which is a little rim, you see. It doesn't seem like much, but when you add it all up, it really improves the effect. And very subtly so you don't really notice something glaring. A couple of things I do want to change. I mean, you notice these veins on the terrain. That's because it thinks there's a little bit of obscurance between this plane and this plane. So it thinks, that's slightly dark, so we put that in. But really, the whole terrain system's a bit of a fudge. I mean, these little grids here, you're not really supposed to see them. The idea is that the diffuse texture sort of blends through all the individual creases, and you never really get to see that it's actually just large polygons making up your floor. And the obscurance detector is showing that up. It's saying, haha. So we're going to have somewhere to switch that off. So don't worry about this huge grid thing that's going on. As you can see, there's also around the hands. If you look at that, you can't really see the hands unless I move all the things out of the way. But if you look at the hand when it's on, when it's off, you see the fingers just underneath the thumb, they're now being shaded, whereas the back of the hand isn't being shaded as much. So actually it's respecting that sort of occlusion as well, obscurance I should say. So yeah, I'm going to add some more to this diagram, this panel, so you can have some SAO sliders, so you can change the intensity and the width and how intense you want that to be. Yes, you will start hitting performance if you increased your taps, your tap samples from 9 to say 150. That means every pixel is now going to check another 150 times whether there's anything around it. Get some great looking ambient occlusion, ambient obscurance, but you may sacrifice performance. So maybe there's a slider that you can put in your in-game menu. We'll make a lure command for it. So if you did want, to give your end user the option of ramping it up to 150 for a gorgeous looking game, you could do that. But if you're running on a laptop, then you can just dial it down to 9 or just switch it off completely. Tell your call. I mean, every time I look at it, I have to ask myself twice whether it's switched on and off because the effect is so subtle. But I always know it is on when I switch it off. I mean, look at that. But then look at that. You get those nice little soft edges around, and it just makes it so much nicer. And if you actually went on, and my ambition is to, this is a first implementation, but my mission is if I went on and said something like scalable ambient obscurance and images, these are the kinds of things that I eventually want to be able to do. If we click the first one, here's a couple of cars in a courtyard. I have managed to do like the little edges around the corners of the walls and stuff, but look at the range of this ambient obscurance. I mean, they're sending rays out a long way in order to create these nice soft I mean, you couldn't do that with 9 rays. You need a lot more than 9 rays. I mean, 27 minimum and then counting. But these are something that I'm hoping that you'll be able to experiment with if I give you enough sliders. So rather than just slap SAO and then mess everyone's graphics up, I'll add it in with some sliders, with the ability to switch it off without impacting on performance, and then I'll let you just have a play with what's the sweet spot for you based on the graphics that you're using. And I've also appreciated that you really want per entity control over specular and illumination, because when you get different graphics going in and they all dropped in, you know, I want specular there, but I don't want it there. And at the moment, you can only have one specular globally across the entire game, which doesn't really work for me. So the more I look at the graphics, the more I look at the visuals, the more I'm asking myself these questions and how can I implement them in a way that won't interfere too much with the voting list. And so slowly Game Guru gets looking better and better. Not by introducing lots of new assets, just by taking things that the engine does and adding extra visual options, which will be available through the tab system. And eventually, you know, we're going to have not just the post-process stuff, but then a huge swathe of, say, entity related tweaks and even more control of the shader. So this is the stuff you see. This is stuff that, oh look, there's some new sliders and you can improve the visuals of your game. And this is the horror story I have to deal with every day, just to make it all happen. And every time I change a literal or move a formula around, someone's going to be unhappy. And by adding SAO, I'm probably going to make a lot of people happy, as it's going to be on by default. Just rest assured you will be able to switch it off and it won't impact you on performance. So another little bit of a comment come in. I'm going to read that because this is what it's about. A load sound command would be nice. Yes, I'm waiting for more community feedback. I want the entire community all to email me and say they want the sound commands putting in. What the sound commands essentially are is, instead of having to just come out, just give you an example. Right now, if you wanted to say have this crate make a sound, you'd have to go into properties. You only have 2 WAV files you can specify, and then inside this basket script you can play sound 1 or sound 2, sound 0 and sound 1, and that's it. The request for the load sound command is that within the script you can load as many sounds as you want and play any of them in any order, and then set the volume and the frequency of them as you see fit. So, you know, that's real power. That means you can actually put music in your title screens and your loading pages. You can have a character that has a lot of things to say for himself or herself, and currently you can't do that with a lot of fudging. Currently what you've got to do is have this basket, put like 9 of them in your game, so that's 18 WAVs, and then have another entity that goes in and causes that entity to trigger its sound. It's a bit of a hack. It's a massive hack. So yeah, we're not going to do that. And you'll notice there is no ambient obscurance in the editor. The point of the editor is to be fast, so you can scroll through and then do all your editing. Only when you do test game you actually get all the nice eye candy. Got a question or a comment here from Synchromesh. How about a brightness slider on the menu? Move slider so you can just see the logo kind of thing. It varies a lot on monitors, if that makes sense. So you can just see the logo kind of thing. Not really sure what you mean. I'll go back to my single building because it takes a while to load in the whole big escape level. The only brightness slider we've got now is the one in the general settings, visual settings. It's here, brightness. Obviously once I've got all the other stuff connected, all this will work together. So yeah, you can control brightness here. If it's a different kind of brightness, we still have 10 more minutes of this broadcast, so yeah, please let me know if it's a brightness somewhere else, or if you're talking about per entity brightness, which is something that we'll be looking to do. Retro Glenbook says, I have to keep reminding me on this load sound. Absolutely, that's the whole point. If I get so many emails, it's like, oh, you know what, I can get rid of 5 emails now if I just add the load sound command. It's not like it's particularly difficult, but you've got to actually look at the picture that I see every day, which isn't just that one request. It's that request added to a list of another 99 requests, and then trying to organise those into priorities. The voting board helps a lot, but then there's a lot of little items, littler tasks that don't really deserve a whole item on the voting board, but do not get implemented. And it's really a question of, you know, do you want to wait 6 months for an update, or do you want an update every 2 weeks? And that really dictates how much of that list we can get done at any one time. And then the order of it, pretty much it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, a lot of members of the community say the same thing. I'm going to push that up the list and get it done. So, last post from Synchromesh. A game may look good on mine, but too dark or light on another user. Ah, right, you mean the standalone. Yeah, when you make a standalone executable, you do get a graphics menu, but you only really have the choice between which shaders you want and the field of view, which is, I think it's this one. No, it isn't. It's this one, yeah. So you can control that, and you can control whether it's low, medium, or high shaders. Having an extra slider for controlling brightness, let me have a little bit of a think, because I can try to add as many features to the Lua commands as possible, so you can do it yourself. Is there a brightness one? Because I do remember adding some control over the visual settings. Whether it extended to... no, I think it was just fog, wasn't it? Yeah. Just go past all this and look for fog. I do remember fog. Here it is. So these ones we dropped in. We added fog, nearest distance, red, green, and blue fog. You can change the fog intensity. You can change the ambience, colour, and intensity. You can change the surface colour and intensity. Change the vignette, motion blur, and depth of field values. But you can't change things like brightness, contrast. And this was actually in the voting board. It may even still be there, unless because some people were saying let's remove it, make it part of core request. Don't need to vote for it; it just needs to go in. So you see, we've got fog, 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 ambient, surface versus surface. The only three things we've not got is global specular, brightness, and contrast as Lua commands. And to have control over that means, you know, you could lightning or some crazy, you know, you've taken some naughty pill and you know your eyesight's going crazy, so then your games start looking psychedelic. Yeah, man, really wiped out. Okay, so those are the missing commands in visual settings. And again, you know, do we do load sound, or do we add those extra Lua commands, or do we add the other 93 things that have also been suggested? That's really what it all boils down to. But yes, with that brightness command as a Lua command, you don't need me to then add it to the in-game menu, because what you can then do is go to Titles Bank, cut and paste the default, and call it, you know, My New Game. And so everything inside this folder now, it's in Titles Bank. You can change every graphic in here. So then when you link your executable to this instead of the default, your game will look different. It'll have different splash screens. There'll be a different logo at the beginning. But what you can also do, if we go to graphics.lua, this is the script for the entire in-game menu. You know, it loads in all the buttons and the title at the top, and it prepares them for you. And when you go into the main loop down here, it can detect whether the mouse is over them and highlight them, and it detects when you've clicked them and what you do when you've clicked them. And you see here, this is the closest one to, say, adding a brightness control. It knows I'm over the field of view slider, works out my X position of my mouse and the buttons range, and then it can get a value from that, and then it caps it to make sure it never goes below 0 or above 100, and then it sets player FOV, which is a Lua command, which sets that field of view for the player. No reason why in the near future we can have a set brightness, and a similar thing here. So you'd write your own brightness slider, just similar like you're doing inside here with all these, but then all I need to do is provide the one command, set brightness, and then you can do all the rest. And that's really the hope with externalizing more of the engine into Lua script. It means you have direct control to be able to add the features you want for your game, and only rely on me to add those core building block Lua commands, which you literally can't fake or fudge right now. There is no way you can change the brightness without sticking a great big sprite all over the screen and then controlling its alpha, which is a technique you could certainly do. But why would you do that when it's already built into the shader and all you need is access to the constant? So those commands will become available, they'll come online, as you know, as the imperative occurs, as people start to keep talking about it over and over again, and then it goes up the list and then it gets implemented, and that's why you get these updates once a month. In that there's a lot of little pieces going in. I mean, if I show you the changelog now, it's here. You can see all these little things. I mean, this wasn't just one feature request. And it wasn't just about the import, it was all sorts of little things like this, excluding the terrain from the light mapping process, so you can do like your interior levels very quickly, light map very quickly, and it doesn't have to light map the entire terrain that goes on for half a mile, and you don't need it. So there's a little flag in the setup by now that switches that off, and it speeds up the light mapping process. You know, that created a bit of a stir in the forum community. A lot of people agreed to it, so it was implemented. So it's just a case of squeaky wheel gets the grease. Get on the forums, make your request, make your case for it, get a lot of people agreeing with you, and then lo and behold, it's probably going to be an update. So I'm looking at the time. There's 5 minutes to spare. I might end this broadcast 5 minutes early. If there's any more questions, please post them. That's what I'm here for. So just to recap on what I've been whittering on about today. Currently, I've got screen space ambient occlusion, or scaling ambient obscurance, whatever you want to call it, currently working in Game Guru version 1.131. I'm now going to reintroduce all the other post-process effects. I'm going to add some sliders to SAO so you control all the radius and intensity and how many samples it will take from the hemisphere of the point that you're interested in. And so you can experiment with the effect and also assess whether it's going to work for you in terms of performance and visuals and the project that you're currently working on. And I will probably do a nice blog covering this and take some really nice screenshots to show some of the best angles for ambient occlusion. I think the best one I like, the one that really shows it for me, good comparison, is this one and this one. Because if we zoom in to say that rather unremarkable corner, yeah, we all recognise that. That's typical Game Guru. You know, when will it ever improve? And then we get to this. Same assets, same everything. It's just like, whoa, what have you done there? Have you created a nice light mapper? Have you increased the quality of the text? No, nothing. It's a real-time effect. Absolutely real-time. And that style, that effect can be applied everywhere. All you got to do is drop some stuff in a level, press a button, and you get that for free, providing your card can handle it. Question just popped in. There's 4 minutes left to go. Retro Game Bloke asks, had any luck getting multi-level weapons carryover working? Yep, that's been fixed. That's in. That's working. If you look at the change log, he added that. Anyway, when making multi-level standalone games, weapons collected in previous level carried over, so that now works. I've also made sure game menu options now works, so if anyone's unfamiliar with that, it's a pretty neat feature. I think one person requested it and somehow it got in. Lucky blighter. It's a new thing that's added. Basically, those are the presets. If you do a standalone game, by default, when you set low, it selects all the lowest shaders. If you select medium, it selects all the medium shaders. If you select high, it selects all the high shaders except entities, which is the highest. But those are just what I've decided. You can change those to anything you want. So low is actually medium, medium is actually high, and then high is actually highest. So you can configure any combination you want in order to get that visual you want to give to your end users. And like I said, that graphics options is just something that I've started off with. You know, you can then create your own menus, add your own tweaks, and the more stuff we add into the Lua system, so you've got more commands to control these lower level stuff, and the more you can do in your own menus. So yeah, carrying over weapons. How we didn't find that earlier, I have no idea. But we found it and we fixed it, and now you can have a gun, you can fire a couple of rounds, you can then leave that level, go to level 2. You can find an Uzi and pick that up. You're still carrying the Colt in level 2, so it still remembers the ammo, and it knows that that's the one you were selected at the time, so you go straight into that with level 2. Even better, when you go back to level 1, it doesn't try and, you know, reset your cult. Once you've got that weapon in the very first level that you start, level 1, it will sort out your player weapon. But after that, you can bounce backwards and forwards between level 1, level 2, level 10, back to level 1, and you just carry that around with you. You carry the weapons you have at the time. And of course, naturally, the save and load progress feature also retains what weapons you've got, and the ammo and the clips and things like that, and what weapons haven't been collected. And it works rather well, and did a bit of testing on that. So look forward to that in version 1.131. Nice little potpourri of features. It wasn't intended, I was going to go straight to 1.14, but as we start working on the FBX static mesh improvements, you know, for importing and then texturing them, and then the different kinds of things, well, you'll see all that. Maybe there'll be another blog next week, a Twitch next week where I can go a little bit more into the importer. But for right now, you know, look forward to 131. It's going to be good. More importer, more little bits and bobs. So hopefully that gives you a nice fill for another hour. As I said, I always wanted to do half an hour, but I always get to do an hour. You lucky blighters. So until next Wednesday, that will be 4 PM British Summer Time, I will be here again. Well, will I? That's a question. I think I am out and about next week. I'm driving to London and back, so I may not be there. But I will let you know on the forums if the Twitch session moves from Wednesday to Thursday, which it may very well do, as I'm thinking about it now. But unless I tell you otherwise, it will be Wednesday next week, 4 PM BST. Be there or be square. I hope you was enjoying this video, or this broadcast, or video if you're watching it on YouTube. So until next week, I shall bid thee farewell.